Today in this lecture we are going to configure DNS server using the Cisco Packet Tracer application. Before we move to the Cisco Packet Tracer application, let us understand the definition of DNS server. A DNS server is a computer server that contains a database of public IP addresses and their associated host names, and it serves to translate those names to IP addresses as requested. DNS server runs special software and communicate with each other using special protocol. What is DNS? The domain name system is an important part of the internet, providing a way to map names to number. Anything connected to the internet, laptops, tablet, mobile phone, website has an unique internet protocol address, that is IP addresses. Domain name system translate human readable domain name to machine readable IP addresses. For example, www.classroom.com to 192.100.145.134. Let us understand what is DNS and the working of DNS server through this diagram. You can see this is a small network I have created. At our right we can see the Google server, and top right corner we can see the Facebook server. So there are some client computers we can observe at the bottom left and bottom right corner. At the middle we can see the DNS server. So all the three servers, the Google server, Amazon server and Facebook server, are connected to the DNS server, and the client system are also connected to the DNS server. Already we have discussed in separate previous lectures that over the network numerous devices are connected, and we are communicating from one device to another device over the network, and we can able to do that only through the IP addresses. IP addresses are nothing but the unique set of 32-bit number that helps to recognize a particular devices over the network. IP address is a unique recognition for all the networking devices over the network. So you can observe the Google server at the top left corner having the IP address 20.54.22.92. That is not the actual IP address of the Google server, but here for making you understand I have assigned IP address for the sake of this tutorial. So at our top right corner you can see the Facebook server that is consisting of IP address, and Amazon server that too have a unique IP address, and you can see the client system at the bottom left and right corner. They are trying to access those servers. Browser trying to access the Google server, the Amazon server or the Facebook server, and the process that take place in between, that our request moves to the DNS server, and DNS server find the associated IP for that particular networking devices for which the domain name we are requesting for, and then DNS server let the client computer know with the IP address of that particular device, and then the client system can directly communicate with the Google or Amazon or Facebook or any other server. So when one system is trying to communicate with other system, that is only possible to the unique set of 32-bit IP address, but it is quite impossible for human being to remember those IP address. It is easy to remember google.com, amazon.com or facebook.com, but it will be quite critical for human being to remember 20.54.22.92, or you may say 12.22.12.12, or for Facebook 30.24.28.134. So this number will be not easy for human being to remember. So it is quite easy for us to remember either facebook.com, amazon.com, google.com. That is why the concept of DNS had applied over here. So what does the DNS do? DNS map a particular IP address with a unique domain name so that human being can remember the domain name, and human being when try to access that particular server through the domain name, the DNS server will play the role. The DNS server is consisting of a database. That database is consisting of the IP addresses of those server and its associated domain name. So when a client system, you can observe at the left right corner, client system are trying to access facebook.com, amazon.com, google.com. So whenever we people are trying to access those server, our request first goes to the DNS server. Then DNS server finds out that particular IP address for which we people have requested through the domain name. Then after finding the associated IP address, it responds the client system with that IP address, so that the client system, after knowing the IP address, can directly communicate with the specific server and access the data. So whatever we are accessing, the web pages or content, video, PDF file from those internet cloud are nothing but a cloud consisting of numerous other networking devices. Cloud is nothing but a big network where all the networking devices are connected, and each and every networking devices is mapped with a specific IP address. And for human being to get easy for human being, so that human being will not able to remember those IP addresses, the DNS server comes into the role. DNS server contains all the unique domain name mapped with its associated IP addresses, so that when any client system try to access that particular server, only they have to remember the domain name, and by accessing the domain name, the DNS server will find the associated networking devices IP address, and it will let the client know about the IP address, so that the client system can automatically access over the network and get the data from that particular server. So this is the way the DNS server plays a vital role to map and record the domain name and its associated IP address. Let us understand this concept using the Cisco Packet Tracer application. This is the Cisco Packet Tracer application. At our right we have the networking tools. These tools will be used to implement the drawing, and at our left bottom corner we have the networking devices. One thing I would like to make you clear, that this video will be difficult for most of the students to understand. I would like to suggest that before you watch this video, you must have clear concept of gateway, router configuration, DHCP server. I have prepared some other videos to let you understand the gateway concept, how to configure router, the route protocol. This thing you have to understand, and you need to have clear concept of these following things. So already I have prepared separate lectures before this video, so I will suggest kindly watch those videos before watching this particular video, because unless you have ideas of gateway, DHCP, router configuration, this particular understanding of DNS server will be bit more difficult for you. So let me start without wasting any more time. So I will take some router. I have taken 3 routers. So I will take some client system. This computer will be the client computer. That means this computer will be the computer those will be used by normal human being like me and you. We will be accessing those server is nothing but server computers. This will be the server computers. These are the server computers. I will take some switch to connect all the system together. So I have taken switch. I need some more switch. I have taken some more switch. Observe, first I will connect these 3 computer with the switch. I will use straight cable. There are 24 ports. I will just occupy 3 ports. Let me connect these 3 computers. These are all client computers. Client will access the server. Client computers are nothing but normal users computer. This is our computer, your computer and mine computer. We will be accessing the cloud through this computer. This is domestic PC, you can say. Now I will connect the router. So observe, you need to remember. So I will use this fast Ethernet 00 port to connect these 3 computers. So you should remember I have used fast Ethernet 00 port. Let me write down over here. FA00. This port I have used. Okay. Here also I will use the same port, fast Ethernet 00. Let me write it down over here. FA00. This port I have used to connect. Okay, this thing, and this is the server. I will take a cable. Now another port, fast Ethernet 01. I will connect here with the switch. Another cable I will take to connect the server with this particular switch. Okay, now again I will take another cable. observe fast Ethernet 01, and this cable I will connect to this server, to this switch. Now let me write fast FA0/1, FA0/1. This port I have used to connect here, FA0/1. This particular port I have used to connect this switch. So now what I will do, I will take another cable, connect here fast Ethernet 00. I will connect here fast Ethernet 00, and I will connect here this particular switch to the server. Just observe closely, fast Ethernet 0/0. This port I have used to connect this switch, this setup, and fast Ethernet 01 I will connect here. Observe, okay, I will connect the server now, okay, FA0/1. Now I will connect all three routers. To connect all the routers, I have to add the serial port. First I will switch off this router. I have switched off the router. Now I will add the serial port. So I have added the serial port. I will again switch on the router. So now again I will work on this particular router. First I will switch off the router. I will add this serial interface card, and again I will switch on the router. I will repeat the process with the third router. So I will switch off. I will add the serial card, and I will switch on. So I have added that serial card to these three routers, consecutive three routers. Now I will take this connection cable serial DC to connect all three routers. See, as I have connected the serial card, these two ports are available for this connection. Previously these two ports were not available, as because I have connected the serial card, that card was consisting of these two ports. That is why we can access these two serial ports. So I will connect one end of the DC cable with this serial 000, and other end of the DC cable with the second router serial port 000. I will take another DC serial cable. I will connect these two routers, serial 001. Here also for this router I will connect it to serial 001. So let me write AC000. So this port I have used, and AC000. So here this port AC000 I have used. AC001, AC001. Here I have connected this end of the port, AC001. AC001 I have connected this end of the port. Okay, so let me name this server as GOOGLE, Google server. So this server will be named as Google server. Okay, this server will have the IP address. Let's assume the IP address will be 20.20.20.2. okay, so this will be the IP address of Google server. Okay, so this is Google server, we can observe, and the IP address of Google server is 20.20.22. okay, so now Amazon server, I will give the IP address, okay, 20.30.30.2. okay, this is the observe. Amazon server will be given the IP address of 30.30.32. This is the Facebook server. IP address will be 40.40.40.2. So this will be the Facebook server. Facebook server IP address will be 40.40.40 and 2. This will be the DNS server. DNS server IP address will be 60.60.60.2. DNS server IP address will be 60, 60, 60 and 2. So we have to assign these IP addresses. This is the IP address of Google server. Now what we need to do, we have to assign the IP addresses for all the router ports. So this port, as the address of the Google server, I have assigned 20.20.22. so this particular port must have the IP address. So what IP address I will assign over here, just observe. The IP address will be in same network, 20.20.20.1, 20.20.21. okay, so this port will have the IP address of 20.20.21. why? Because Google server and this particular router port, the port is fast Ethernet 01, must belong to a same network. So what is the network address? 20. 20 is the network address for both the Google server and the port fast Ethernet 01 of the router. Okay, and here the address I will provide 10.10.10.1. so the address of this port fast Ethernet 00 will be 10 10 10 and 1. So okay, now the address of this particular port I will assign as the observe the Amazon server networking address is 30. So this fast Ethernet 01 port must have the same networking address, that is 30.0.0.1. so both the Amazon server and the router fast Ethernet 01 port must belong to a same network. That is why the network address for both Amazon server and the fast Ethernet 01 port of this router where I have connected this connection belongs to same network. Observe. So now I will assign IP for this 40.40.40.1. Observe the network address of Facebook server and this particular port fast Ethernet 01 of the router. Both this port must have same network address. Both the port must have network address same, that is 40. Okay. So now let me assign IP addresses for the okay. So this is the DNS. This DNS server will have the IP address 60.60.60.1. Observe the DNS server IP address 60.60.62. so the connection setting up from this particular port. That is why IP address of this router port fast Ethernet 00 and DNS server IP address, both the IP address must have same networking IP. So the network address for both DNS server and this port will be 60. Now T 40 50. So the IP address for this particular serial port it should be different from all the IP that I have already written for other ports. So let me provide 50.50.50.1. 50 I have not provided yet, so I have not provided this 50 networking address to any of the port yet. So I think this will be work over here 50.50.50.2. so this is same network. You can see this is a single network and connected in both the routers. So both the ends are connected to these two routers. So a single network having two separate hosts. That is why the network value is same 50, but the host value for these two connections are different. So for the left side connection the host value is 50 51 and the right side value for the host connection is 50 52, but this is a single network having two separate hosts. Okay, you can observe. Let me provide the IP address here 70.70.70.1 70 70 71. So IP address for this particular port I will provide 70 70 70 and 1. So and the IP address for this port will be 80.80.80.1 80 80 81, and this port will be 80.80.80.2. so this is same network, one network and two separate hosts. You can see one cable, that means one network that is connected to this router. So one end of the connection will be 80 80 81, other end will be 80 80 82. so okay, fine. Let me start to configure this router. So I need a laptop to configure all three routers. For that I will take the computer. Okay, let me take a laptop from here. I will connect this laptop RS232 port, one end of the console cable, other end of the console cable I will connect to the console port. Now let me take other two laptop. Okay, so I have taken laptop. For configuration I will take cable RS232 port and console cable. Here also I will connect RS232 port with the console cable. Now let me start configuring. Just observe the IP address same IP address I will assign to all these 3 ports. So it should be carefully done. Observe, from this laptop I am accessing the router terminal. I will keep all the default parameter as it is. I will not going to change. So no, I will not going to continue the default dialog configuration. I will enable the router. I will move to config mode, config terminal. I will move to the interface. Let me first configure the fast Ethernet 00 interface FA 00. I will assign IP address. So which IP? 10.10.10.1 10.10.10.1 255.0.0.0. okay, you can observe 10.10.10.1 255.0.0.0 subnet mask. So this IP address, so this particular IP address I have assigned to the port now. Okay, no shutdown. We know that this port was kept down, so I will make it no shutdown. Okay, exit. So I have exited out from that interface. Now I will move. Now I am in config mode. I will move to this particular mode, FA01. So interface FA0/1. Now I will IP address. I will assign IP address for this port. Can observe 20.20.21 20.20.20.1 20.20.21 255.0.0.0. okay, exit. I will apply no shut command. Okay, again I will move interface, no shut. Now exit. Now I will move to the serial port. This serial port interface serial 00. So this serial port AC000 IP address. So IP address will be 50.50.51 50.50.50.1 50.50.51 followed by 255.0.0.0. okay, no shut. And now, as because this end of the serial cable is belonging to DCE interface, I will apply the clock rate 64,000, that is 64 kilobyte. Now I will again exit. I will save, exit. Okay, now I will configure this 4 port through this laptop. I will access the interface of the router. No enable configure terminal fast Ethernet 00. I have accessed this port. The IP address is 70.70.71 70.70.70.1. sorry, IP address 70.70.70.1 followed by 255.0.0.0. okay, now I have assigned the IP address. I will no shut. I will apply no shut. Now I will move to the other port interface FA0-1 IP address. So now I will assign IP address to fast Ethernet 01, this particular port. Just watch the IP address 30.30.31 30.30.30.1. okay, followed by 255.0.0.0. so this is the default subnet. No shut. Okay, exit. Again I will move to the serial port. We have to configure both the serial ports. So INT interface serial 00, this serial port I will access. So I have accessed this particular serial port. Observe the IP address 50.50.52. so IP address 50.50.50.2 255.0.0.0. okay, no shut. Exit. Now I will access the another serial port interface SC01. so now I will access this serial port. okay, IP address, just observe 80.80.81 80.80.80.1 followed by 255.0.0.0. okay, I have assigned no shut. okay, so observe this end of this serial cable is DC interface. So as because this end of the serial cable is DC interface, I will apply clock rate. Clock rate will be 64,000, that is 64 kilobyte. exit. So okay, I have assigned successfully these 4 IP addresses. Now exit. I will save, exit. Now I will assign IP address for this router, this 3 port. Let me do that from this laptop. I will try to access the interface of this router. So all the parameter I will not going to change. I will keep it default as it is. So config terminal interface FA00. So I have accessed this particular interface FA00. Look at the IP address that to be assigned 60.60.61. 60.60.60.1, sorry, IP address 60.60.60.1 followed by subnet 255.0.0.0. Okay, no short. Okay, now I will access this port. Let me move out, exit. Now I am going to access this port. So INT interface, fast Ethernet, and 0-1. So I have accessed this particular port. Look at the IP address that to be assigned over here, 40.40.40.1. observe. So IP address 40.40.40.1 followed by 255.0.0.0 default subnet. So I have assigned IP address. Now no cert. Now let me exit. So I have exited out from the interface. Now I will access this interface serial 01. So serial 001, this is serial 001. IP address I will assign for this serial port will be 80.80.82. so 80.80.80.2. observe 255.0.0.0. now okay, successfully I have assigned IP addresses for all the port. Let me exit out, save. So let me observe the IP address for this particular router. You can observe for the fast Ethernet 00 I have assigned the IP address 10.10.10.1, and for the fast Ethernet 01 port I have assigned the IP address 20.20.21, and for the serial port 000 50.50.51. Another serial port is empty. I have not set any IP address for serial 001, and for this particular router you can observe that fast Ethernet 00 has been assigned with the IP address 70.70.71, and fast Ethernet 01 has been assigned with the IP address 30.30.31, and the serial port serial 000 has been assigned with the IP address 50.50.52, and serial 001 has been assigned with the IP address 30.80.80.80 and 1. And here for this particular router fast Ethernet 00 60.60.61, and fast Ethernet 01 40.40.41, and the serial 000 that is not set any IP address, and for serial 001 80.80.82. okay, so now I have assigned IP address for all the router port, but I have to run the REAP protocol because all the IP addresses which I have assigned over the network routers, I have to make this IP addresses known to each and every router. So the adjacent routers are not familiar with the IP addresses that I have assigned to other routers. So I will inform all the routers I will inform all the IP addresses of different router ports which I have assigned over the network. So each router must know all the other routers port IP addresses. So I will run the REAP protocol and make each router inform about all other routers IP addresses. So let me start with this particular router. So there are 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 10. So there are 10 router ports where I have assigned the IP addresses. So there are 10 active ports. So each and every router in this network will be informed by the IP addresses of 10 ports. So let me start with this particular router. I will access the interface again. So enable configure terminal. Now router REAP, this is the protocol network. I will inform about all the networking addresses. So let me start 10.10.10.1, then 20.20.20.1, then 10 20 30.30.30 30 30 30.1, 30.30.31, then 40.40.40.1, 40.40.41, and you can see after that 50 network 50.50.50.1, then 50.50.52. You can see there are in this particular network 50 there are two separate hosts, 50.50.51 and 50.50.52. so all these have to be informed to each and every router. So okay, then 60.60.60.1, then 70.70.70.1, after that 80, now 80.80.80.1, now 80.80.82. okay, so just observe 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 there are two ports for this particular network, and then 60, 70 and 80 there are two ports for this network. 80, under 80 you can observe under 80 there are two ports assigned with the IP addresses, and under 50 there are also two ports assigned with the IP addresses. So okay, now exit, save, exit. Now same IP addresses I will inform to this particular router. Let me do that. Okay, so enable config terminal, router rep protocol network. I will inform about the networking addresses 10.10.10.1, 20.20.20.1, 30.30.30.1, 40.40.40.1, now 50.50.50.1, 50.50.52, 60.60.60.1, now 70.70.70.1, 80.80.80.1, now 80.80.82. so observe 10, 20, 30, 40, in 50 there are two ports, 60, 70, in 80 there are also two ports. So all IP addresses I have informed this router. So this router has been informed with all the networking IP addresses. Okay, so exit. Now I will inform this router about all the IP addresses. So let me do it. Enable router rep network 10.10.10.1 network 10.10.10, 20.20.20.1, and 30.30.30.1, 40.40.40.1, 50.50.50.1, 60.60.60.1. One thing I have missed, 50.50.52, 70.70.70.1, 80.80.80.1, and 2. Okay, observe 10, 20, 30, 40, 51, 50 and 60, and after that again I have repeated 5, 52, 70, 81, 82. Okay, I have informed this router about all networking ports. Exit. Let me first check the connection. So now I will first assign the IP addresses to all these computers. So first I will assign IP address to this computer. So the IP address must belong to similar network 10. All the computers connected to this port of the router must have the same networking address. All the computers must belong to this particular network, that is value starting with 10 in the first octet. So 10, this is the network address. The host address could be any number. Okay, so that is not going to be significant, but the network address must be same 10. So this is the network address. Okay, so I have given the host address as 10.10.2. okay, and the gateway will be 10.10.1. so this particular port address, the fast Ethernet 00, this port will be work as the gateway for all the computers that will be connected through this network. So this will be work as the gateway for all the computers that I will connect over here. So for these three computers the gateway will be 10.10.10.1. so this is the gateway 10.10.10.1. okay, and now the DNS server will be, you can see the address of the DNS server 60.60.60.2. so 60.60.62. so this is the DNS server. So just provide the value of DNS server here, DNS server. Okay, now I will assign IP address for this computer. So this is the gateway, DNS server will be 60.60.60.2 DNS server. Okay, now okay, gateway, see, same gateway for all three computers. DNS server 60.60.60.2, this is the DNS server. Okay, observe. So now I will set IP address for these three computers. So observe, the networking address must be 70. So all the computers that I am going to connect to this switch should belong to the same network, that is 70.70.70.2. The gateway will be, this will be the gateway 70, 70, 71. So this port address, that is fast Ethernet 00, this port address will be gateway for all these three computers, or the number of computers that I am going to connect to this network must belong to the similar network, and this will be the gateway. So this will be the gateway for all the computers that I am going to connect over here. So all the traffic that will pass through the computers will follow through this port. So this port address, that is the port fast Ethernet 00 address, will be the gateway for all the computers. Okay, 70, 70, 71. So this is the gateway, and DNS server will be same. This is the DNS server that all the computer is going to access. So 60.60.60.2. So 60, 60, 62. This is the DNS server. 60.60.60.2 DNS server. And DNS server 60.60.60.2. So observe the DNS server address, and this is the gateway, and this is the computer address. So okay, so first let me just check whether the connection has been established successfully or not. I will try to send a packet from this computer to this computer. So the first packet will be always checked, verified and rejected. From the next onward we will be able to send packets successfully. Observe. So let me try once more from this computer to this computer. First packet was rejected, but second packet was successful. So now the number of packet that I am going to send, so it will be successful. So observe, so all packet will be successfully passed from one computer to another computer over the network. So okay, so now we will configure the server address. Observe the Google server. So this is the Google server. So this is the Google server I have accessed. I will assign the IP address. So 20.20.22. So the address of the Google server will be 20.20.20.2. Okay, this is the address of Google server, and the gateway value will be 20.20.21. Why? Observe, Google server will access traffic from this port fast Ethernet 01. Google server will access any request and it will send response through this particular port of the router. The port is fast Ethernet 01 and the IP address for that port is 20.20.21. So that will be the gateway for the Google server, 20.20.21. Remember this thing. So I have already told you that you must have a good concept of router configuration, DHCP server, gateway, read protocol. All these things you should know before you come and watch this particular video. So already have told you before. This thing already have discussed in other lecture before. So what will the DNS server? This is the DNS server 60.60.60.2. So for the Google server, the DNS server address will be same, 60.60.62. This is the DNS server. Okay, observe. Now I will assign IP address for the Amazon server. Okay, so let me assign address for the Amazon server. So 30.30.30.2. observe, 30.30.32. so 30.30.32, and the gateway will be 30.30.30 and 1. Observe, 30.30.30 and 1. So Amazon server will receive and send all request and response packet through this particular port of router, that is fast Ethernet 01, and the IP address of fast Ethernet 01 will work as the gateway access for the Amazon server. So that is why I provided the gateway IP address as 30.30.31. So observe, so DNS server will be same 60.60.60.2. so this will be the DNS server IP address. Observe, now I will assign IP for the Facebook server. Observe carefully, 40 40 40 and 2, 40.40.40.2. okay, now the gateway value will be 40 40 40 and 1. Observe, Facebook server will access and receive and send all the response and request packets through this particular port of the router where this cable is connected, that is fast Ethernet 01, and the IP address for this particular port has been assigned with 40 40 41. so that will be the gateway for Facebook server, 40 40 41. so and DNS server will be same 60 60 60 and 2, 60.60.60.2. observe 60 60 62. okay, now I will configure the DNS server IP address. So let me configure the DNS server IP address. So the DNS server IP address will be 60.60.60.2. so this is the IP address of DNS server, and the gateway of DNS server should be 60 60 61. observe, DNS server will access all the traffic through this port of the router, that is fast Ethernet 00, and the IP address of this port is 60 60 61. so that number will be the gateway value for the DNS server, so 60 60 61, and the DNS server for the DNS server will be itself. So that means the DNS server for this particular DNS server will be same 60 60 62. okay, so now I will do the mapping of domain name. So watch carefully. So I have opened the DNS server. I will go to config and observe. I will go and click to this menu under the config tab, that is DNS. so now I will start the mapping. Here I will create the database. So all the client, you can observe, all this client will type the domain name and its associated IP addresses will be registered to this DNS server. So I am creating that database where all this domain name and its associated IP address will be recorded. So I am creating the registered book here. So observe clearly. So I will first switch on the DNS service. So first I have switched on this DNS service and I will write the domain name. So to access this Google server, I will provide the domain name, that is google.com. so google.com, google.com. so this is the domain name. I would like to register for this Google server. So domain name will be mapped with the associated IP address. The associated IP address will be 20.20.22. so 20.20.20.2. so this is the associated IP address for the server 20 20 20 and 2, and I have assigned a domain name, that is a unique domain name in this DNS table. So I will add. Okay, I have added successfully this particular record to this registration table of DNS server. So now DNS server hold this record at number 1 position. Observe, the domain name is google.com and its associated IP address is 20.20.22. so that is the IP address. So when the any user like us will try to access this particular server, they are going to type just google.com. Then from the user system, the response will comes to this DNS server, and DNS server will check its record, and it will find that the user is trying to access this particular IP address, that is 20.20.22. Then this particular IP address will be responded to the client again. Now after that, client will be able to know, client system automatically will be informed about this particular IP address. Then the client system will be able to communicate with the Google server directly. So this process will take place. Let us assume that any client know the IP address for a particular server. If we can try to access the server by typing the IP address in the Google Chrome or maybe Mozilla web browser, then we can access the server without sending request to the DNS server. So that time DNS server will not play any role, because the client already knew the IP address of the server. Then the client can directly access with the server. In that case, you can receive fast response from the server, because the time between the communication with the DNS server will not be utilized, because DNS server will only play role if client are trying to access any server through the domain name. That time only DNS server will respond to the request. If any user client will try to access the server through the IP address, that time the request will not move to the DNS server. Then in that particular case, the user can directly send request to the dedicated server or the particular server where the user trying to access through. So okay, now I will create a record for the Amazon server. So I will write here AMAZON, Amazon.com. So AMAZON, Amazon.com. IP address of the Amazon is 30.30.30.2 30.30.32. Okay, now I will add, let me add, I will create a record for Facebook, FACE, face BOOK.com, FACE BOOK, Facebook.com. So the IP address is 40.40.40.2. Observe Amazon.com, Facebook.com, Google.com. So all the IP addresses and its associated domain name has been registered successfully in this DNS registration table. So this is called DNS registration table. 30.30.32 for Amazon, 40.40.42 for Facebook, 20.20.22 for Google. So this DNS server hold all the records of the IP addresses and the associated domain name. All these domain name are unique. Okay, we can't provide duplicate domain name in this registered book of DNS service. Okay, now so let us put some data. So I will just click the Google server, and now I will go to the config menu. So here I will go to the HTTP. So here we can see this is the page. So this will be the content when the user will try to access the Google server. Then this will be the content. I would like to change the content, so I will remove all this. So I will just write WELLCOME, welcome to the Google server, Google GOOGLE, Google server system, welcome to the Google server system. So when anybody will try to access the Google server, the page will display and there will be written welcome to the Google server system. So okay, now I will just change the content of the Amazon server. I'll click the Amazon server, I'll go to config and HTTP. So I'll just change the content, welcome to the Amazon, AMAZON, Amazon server system. Okay, now I will change the content of the Facebook server, config and HTTP. Okay, so let me change welcome to the Facebook, welcome to the Facebook server system. So now the client will try to access from the computer system. So let me try to access the Google server first. I will try to access the Google server by typing www.google.com from this computer. So I have access from PC1, I will just go to web browser. So from web browser I will type in the address bar google.com. Okay, observe google.com, google. Go. Welcome to the Google server system. Observe, welcome to the Google server system. So I have accessed this particular Google server from this computer. Now I can also try to access the Google server by typing the address. So 20.20.20.2. so this is the address of the Google server. I can also access the Google server by direct typing the IP address. So observe, same, welcome to the Google server system. Okay, by IP address also I can able to access. So now I will try to access the Amazon server. Okay, from let us access from this computer. This is the client computer. So client want to access Amazon.com. So I will open the website, Google Chrome or maybe any browser, and I will type amazon.com. So now, so I will just click go. Observe, welcome to the Amazon server. So from this computer I have written Amazon.com and pressed the go button. So the request has been sent to the server, DNS server, and after that the DNS server checked from its database that the client was trying to access this IP address 30.30.32 from its registration record, and then the server has responded that IP address to the client system, and the client system able to communicate with the Amazon server after being informed about the IP address. So if I try to access the server by typing the address, then observe 30.30.32. if I try to access directly by the IP address, in that case the client system will not request the DNS server for the IP address, because that time client will be able to communicate with the server directly, because client is accessing the server by the IP address. So if you know the IP address of any particular website or any particular server, you can directly access with that particular server. In that case, that will take less response time. Okay, that will take less response time. Observe, why that will take less response time? Because the time of communication between the DNS server and your system will be eliminated. That process will be eliminated. Which process? Because initially when you are not informed about the IP address, because human being can't memorize all the IP address, that is why we have to access by the domain name. So as we are accessing the server by the domain name are registered in the DNS server system, and that is why first client system try to communicate with the DNS server and find out the IP address from the record. After knowing the IP address, then again client system try to access that particular server. So that process is eliminated of communication between the DNS server and your system if you know the IP address of any website. Okay, so one thing I will experiment. Okay, I will try to access the Facebook server from this PC0. Before that, I will do one thing. I will remove the DNS server. So here DNS server settings I will remove. Okay, I have removed the DNS server setting. Now observe, now I don't have the DNS server settings, okay, in this particular system, and from this system I will try to access the Facebook server by typing facebook.com in the browser. Right, observe, FACE, face BOOK.com. So Facebook, FACE BOOK, facebook.com. Observe, so I can't access the Facebook server. Why? See, I can't access the Facebook server. Why? Because DNS server is not linked to my IP address configuration settings. So I could not able to communicate with the DNS server. If I fail to communicate with the DNS server, then how will I know the IP address for the Facebook server? I had to communicate with the DNS server to fetch the IP address from the DNS registration record. Then only I will be able to communicate with the Facebook server. So you can observe in this particular system PC1 I do have the DNS server, so I can access here from this computer. I can access facebook.com easily. Observe, welcome to Facebook server system. Yes, I have successfully accessed the Facebook server because here I have the DNS settings here. As because we have the DNS setting over here, we can able to communicate with the DNS server. We have sent the request of the domain name to the DNS server. DNS server checked the record and then send me the response with the IP address of the Facebook server, and after that I can able to communicate with the Facebook server. So in this particular system we don't have the DNS settings. So if I try to access the Facebook server by the IP address, let me check. The IP address of Facebook server is 40.40.40.2. So observe 40.40.42. This is the IP address of Facebook server. I can access easily. Why? I need not require now to communicate with the DNS server. I can directly access the Facebook server because I have got the IP address. I know the IP address of the Facebook server. Now I need not require to communicate the DNS server. I can directly access the Facebook server by this IP address. Welcome to the Facebook server system. But if I try to access the Facebook server with the domain name that is not known to me, if I try to do that, in that case it will not be possible. Observe. So in this particular case this is not possible. Why? Because the IP address is not known to me. IP address of the Facebook server is known to the DNS server. As because I don't have the DNS server settings in my IP configuration, I will not be able to communicate with the DNS server. If I will be not communicate with the DNS server, I will not be responded with the IP address of the Facebook. So let me provide the DNS IP address over here, 60.60.60.2. Observe, I have provided the IP address of the DNS server in the DNS settings. Now I will try to access again. So facebook.com. observe, see, welcome to the Facebook server system. Okay, so I hope you have understood this particular lecture. This lecture will be difficult for you to understand. That is why I have suggested you to watch the previous lectures, learn to configure router, learn the concept of gateway, learn the concept of several REAP protocol. You have also need to learn the DHCP. Everything you need to learn before you come and watch this particular video. So this is a complete video consisting all the little part. So this video could be difficult for you at the initial level. So you have to watch this particular lecture repeatedly, and you have to try the practice in your system. Install this particular application, Cisco Packet Tracer, in your own system and practice the same. Then only you will be able to clear this particular topic of DNS configuration. So let us end my lecture today. Thank you for watching.